Okay, well, joining us now, Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, who's Dean of the Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you for joining us on the programme. Now, the US openly says it has assassinated an Iranian general. Is this a point of no return for the US and Iran?
Nikki, it's a very unfortunate situation because until 2016, Iran and the United States seem to be, in a major stage of rapprochement through the nuclear deal. And now, everything has come unraveled. And the killing of Qassem Soleimani, you're right, it's not an ordinary act, because even though the US designates him as a terrorist and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization, that's a unilateral thing because, end of the day, he represented the state of Iran at the very, very highest levels. And he was very close to Ayatollah Khamenei, the spiritual leader, and had a lot of autonomy to do, major operations and to expand Iran's sphere of influence across the region in the Middle East, especially in the Shia zone, which includes Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and so on. So to take him out like this, I think it is, I think they have not really thought through. I mean, the US government, Trump, as well as the Pentagon should have thought about consequences, because, you see, there is a belief that they can establish deterrence through application of maximum force and, through decapitation of major quote-unquote terrorist leaders. But Qassem Soleimani is not Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Qassem Soleimani is a representative of a state. And that's where, it's a much higher level of the stakes are higher. And surely the retaliation is not only going to be limited to attacks, potential attacks on US forces in Iraq, but also their allies. You see, this is the big problem, because the US has an alliance system in the region, especially Saudi Arabia and also Israel, who are dead against Iran. And so this would really spiral out, because the Iranians can hit at US bases, at American contractors, like happened recently. And end of the day, this is a proxy war. What is going on? I feel very much, Nikki, for the people of Iraq and the people of Lebanon, the people of Syria, the people of Libya. I mean, all these countries, you have a situation where there are regional powers, they have legitimate rights and to have influence, but then there are extra regional powers coming from elsewhere who are challenging this and are trying to carve out their own sphere of influence. And the Iraqis, the poor Iraqis, you will remember, Nikki, the war started in 2003. When Saddam Hussein was overthrown. 17 years have passed. The Iraqis are again on the streets. Some of them are saying Iran should leave us alone. And then there are others who are now debating whether the US forces should remain. Because as long as US forces, about 5,000 of them, remain in Iraq, they are vulnerable now to retaliation by Iran. So in a way, it's like a self-goal of the US. I thought that Obama's strategy, relatively speaking, was more clear-cut. Let us engage with Iran. Let us try to include them gradually, and create a more conducive atmosphere, which is free of tension and violence. But now, I think removal of the scrapping of the JCPOA was the first step, and now killing of Qassem Soleimani, definitely it means that it's an undeclared war. And
another concern, of course, sorry to interrupt, another concern is that Iran's hand in fighting ISIL. I mean, the general who's being killed, he headed the elite Iranian extraterritorial forces involved in that fight. So how will his death affect security in the region?
That's true. In fact, although the US is calling Qassem Soleimani the terrorist, as you rightly mentioned, he was actually leading the anti-ISIS and the anti-jihadist, movement in the entire region. He was coordinating forces with so many allied militias as well as governments to try and check this extreme Sunni jihadism that has been emanating from that region. So it is a blow. If the US is stepping back from parts of Syria, but it remains in Iraq and in the Gulf region and is reinforcing more troops there. But ISIS can regroup because, in northern Syria, they have, taken advantage of the US pullout. So there's a confusing mix of policies by the US. There's no clear strategic commitment or signaling being done. On one hand, they say ISIS is already over and Trump has declared victory over ISIS. So then it's up to the countries in the region really to try and forge a united front and to beat this demon. But unfortunately, they have been divided by the U.S. alliance system as pro-American and anti-American. And Iran has been placed in the anti-American camp. So that's the problem. I think they have to find a way for, the regional powers, especially Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. They must find a way to coexist. But if the U.S. uses this kind of...
What do you make of the Pentagon claims that the airstrike was a defensive action to defend American interests in the region?
Well, look at the casualties they have suffered recently from these popular mobilization force. They are not of the scale of this retaliation. I mean, there was one American contractor who was killed in an airstrike, and then there was the siege of the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, but no lives were lost there. But the retaliatory tactics they're using is maximum force. They are, lobbing grenades and missiles at whoever, and the 24 people were apparently killed. One of these popular mobilization forces recently, and now General Soleimani himself, as well as the coordinator of all the popular mobilization forces. So I think they have lost proportion, and what they don't realize is that the hit back is also going to be disproportionate and is going to be not exactly aimed at U.S. facilities alone, but their entire alliance system and their regional support structure. So instead of making it spiral out of control, I don't think Trump has really a plan to manage this. I mean, he's simply, for the moment, gloating in the so-called U.S. patriotism that, we took out a terrorist. But frankly, as I said, Baghdadi was the enemy of humanity and of the whole region. You cannot bracket Soleimani in the same thing. That's the problem with the U.S. Anyone who opposes their hegemony or their dominance, they brand them as terrorists. And they say we have a right to kill them. So I think this, they've gone beyond control, and they should be stepping back and exercising restraint. The U.S. often advises many countries to exercise restraint when they are in regional hotspots. But I think this is the time when the entire international community should tell the U.S. and, of course, Iran also, not to make this, to go beyond the precipice.
Thank you. Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, Professor indeed of the Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you for your time.